Hey everyone. So through Law Firm Suites, I've had the privilege to work with over 300 law firms. And in 10 years, I could think of only three firms that have grown to more than three associates or three lawyers associated with the firm. And of those firms had at least three partners, and two of the three were involved in contingency cases. You can make a really awesome living as a solo attorney, but if you have ambitions to scale up your practice, hire associates or add on other lawyers, it can be really challenging. So recently I was at a networking event to celebrate the opening of our new location in Annapolis, Maryland, and I had the good fortune to run into DC tax lawyer Glen Frost. And just to kind of describe the setting, the room was filled with mostly young lawyers who were still working for firms. So I naturally gravitated to Glen since he had made the transition to self-employment and we have a lot in common. And if I don't say, I mean this in a flattering way, Glen's a pretty unsuspecting guy. I mean, he fit right in the room with the rest of the lawyers. But when we started to practice, he described to me how, as a solo attorney, he built a massive law practice. And in the world of small firm law practice, Glen is a bona fide unicorn. He currently has 11 other lawyers that are working for him full time, plus an additional 12 non-lawyer staff members. He's got offices based in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and he represents clients in IRS tax disputes nationwide. So I've been chasing Glen down for months to do an interview with me because I personally want to know his secrets to success, and I know that all the fans of our content will love this information as well. So here we are. Welcome, Glen.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. So you've had a bit of a non-traditional trajectory into law practice. So for context, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background, your education, and your work history before starting your law firm?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, a master's degree in forensic accounting. I worked for a international accounting firm, Grant Thornton, in their audit division, and afterwards decided to go into law school and get a master's of taxation as well.
Okay. And did you work for a law firm after you graduated law school, or did you go directly into solo practice?
I did. I worked, because I was already a CPA when I went to law school, I worked for I worked for two different law firms while I was in law school, doing very similar practice to what I'm doing now. And I practiced at two firms after law school as well, and then made a transition into being a solo.
That transition, and I always kind of find it fascinating how lawyers end up being self-employed. Was it something that you did intentionally, or was there some factor in the market that made you decide to go solo? I know my personal story is, it was a down economy and a layoff propelled me into self-employment, but it was something I always wanted to do. What about yourself?
Yeah, I guess I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always had various businesses. And I saw an opportunity. I saw, a kind of a market out there that wasn't tapped. There's a lot of really good work and a lot of really good clients out there I thought I could help. And maybe I just had a different methodology than the firms I had worked at. And, I was young, willing to take the risk, and went out, and probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Awesome. And how long has it been so far now since you've made that transition?
About 5.5 years.
Okay, great. And so you have a traditional kind of time for dollars law practice. I mean, even if you do some fixed fee work, at the end of the day, you're still trading time for dollars. In other words, it's not a contingency-based practice. And like I said in the intro, most of the firms that I've seen that have been able to scale up have had some form of contingency-based have had some form of contingency-based revenue coming in, which a lot of times gave them a big pot of money to scale up. So what do you think makes you different from the vast majority of other small firm lawyers who never get beyond a one-man army? Is it your mindset, or is it preparation? Is it a willingness to take risks?
Yeah, I think it's just, it's a lot of work. It's very hard work. I kind of had a formula when I started my own practice that I would spend half of the time actually practicing law and billing clients, and half of my time on different marketing efforts, whether it's going to networking events, whether it's going to lunches, whether it's working on websites or, other SEO stuff. The half and half formula I've kind of stuck to and stayed true to since I've started my own practice.
Is it still like that today?
Yeah, very similar to that today. I spend a substantial amount of my time on marketing and advertising and networking.
I mean, there are a lot of lawyers who could spend, half of their time or more of their time doing marketing and have it not generate results. And I know you've mentioned to me before that that you have, when you started, tried a bunch of different marketing tactics and you saw what worked and what didn't. So, where did you learn about marketing, and how did you decide which marketing tactics work and which ones do the best for your firm?
Yeah, like I said, when I went out on my own, I tried every marketing method. I didn't try radio or television, but pretty much everything else. Kind of tried to track that and determined what worked, what didn't work. I found the website and SEO, it did work, but perhaps the best was the personal relationships I made with, other lawyers, accounting firms, financial advisors, other business professionals. I found that the best types of work were coming from those professionals. And, a lot of my networking with them is, hey, if you have a tax question or you need any help with anything, just call me. I'll help you through it. I'm not going to bill you. I'll help you through whatever problem you have, and kind of giving to people. I feel that, more comes back if you openly give to people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's tried and true advice for networking. You got to give before you get. So obviously the networking stuff you were doing on your own, and that's not very costly. But some of the other marketing tactics, requires a budget and it requires, skills that a lot of lawyers don't have. Did you work with professionals or have a budget set aside to do some of those other tactics?
Yeah, I didn't really budget. I mean, I put some money in it, and I kind of saw that there was, a return on investment. So, I kept, kind of cranking it up gradually.
How long would you say that it took for you to see a return on investment in terms of spend with marketing? Because sometimes the on-ramp can be a little bit long, 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. 3 or 4 months is when you start seeing returns. With the face-to-face marketing, it might be longer. You might be going to a lunch or going to a dinner or meet somebody at a networking event, and they might not refer you a case for 2 years, 3 years. But it's kind of trying to keep in touch with those people, trying to let them know, hey, you're still around, you're still looking out for them, you're still trying to find referrals for them as well.
How do you do that? Do you have a system for doing that, or have people who help you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe I have a system. For instance, we, send out holiday cards, we send out, certain holiday gifts as well. I also have a pretty large annual party, kind of inviting referral sources and friends and their families to a large party. I think this year we had about 550 or so people at that.
Wow, it's a serious event.
Yeah.
So when you started your practice, did you have a goal for the practice before starting it in terms of size? I mean, I think, part of it is I think some solos don't see themselves as having a big practice. Some of them don't know where they want to go. Did you have, a goal set, like I want to be, here, and to get here, I need to have a firm of this size?
Yeah. I don't believe I had a goal, but, as an attorney and a CPA, I look closely at financial statements. I look at my financial statements monthly and determine what's working, what's not working. So my goal was, let's expand if it makes sense to the bottom line. Let's not expand if it doesn't make sense. But if we can increase the bottom line, then absolutely, expansion, it should be done.
Okay, so a lot of solos start their practice on a shoestring budget. What about you? Did you start out with a significant cash investment, or did you bootstrap? How did you manage finances in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it didn't really cost. There wasn't a whole lot of cash outlay. In the very beginning, I used another lawyer's office to meet with clients, I worked a lot out of my house. This was only for a month or two. And literally all I needed was a laptop and, maybe some case management software and a very small investment to get it going.
How long did you work like that before you started to scale up on your expenses?
Sure. I'd say a month or two. And then that's when I made a move kind of to a virtual office. And then I realized, hey, I have too much work to do it myself. I hired a law clerk, that was in law school who was also a CPA. Realized then another month or so later that, hey, I have way too much work for just a law clerk and that's when I made the first associate hire.
Okay. And so, that's interesting. There are a lot of different philosophies about making your first hire. I know that Lee Rosen, who manages the Divorce Discourse website and blog, recommends not making your first hire until it's really painful, like until you're doing about 300,000 in revenue, that's a lot of revenue for a solo. And you've clearly taken a different tack. And so, a lot of times there's this gap between making making your first hire and being able to pay for that first hire. Like, you know that you need to be spending more time out there marketing, but you may not necessarily have the revenues in place to fully support that person and your personal expenses. So how did you manage that gap?
Yeah. I never saw, I do have other businesses and other resources. Luckily I didn't have to use those for the law firm, but I saw that the work was there. Fortunately with my practice, I can also do accounting work and tax preparation. So there's certainly plenty of that out there as well. And I knew that I would have enough to support an associate and myself and the overhead as well. So,
okay. So you were doing some accounting work and tax prep to sort of offset while you were building the law practice.
correct. And I'd say, my practice is a little blended. We do different accounting and tax preparation for people as well. And I represent a lot of lawyers and law firms with that as well. But and we also do, the traditional tax law work as well. So it's, when you get into tax law, it's the lines are a little gray between accounting and the legal.
Okay. Your practice is obviously very regulatory based. And I've seen a lot of firms that have been successful with regulatory based practices because there's always a need to comply. Do you think that factors into how quickly you've been able to grow?
Yes, there was a couple of, initiatives by the IRS. One was their foreign bank account reporting initiative. And, they've been cracking down on taxpayers who have, businesses, trusts, partnerships overseas, foreign bank accounts overseas. So I've really, that really started in 2008 with the Swiss banking program. Really dug in hard on that, made that a very important part of my practice, and it paid off.
Awesome. So I know that you're an avid networker and you know a ton of lawyers, and I know you probably know plenty of solo and small firm lawyers that just are kind of plateaued. You've got a lot of business acumen beyond just the practice, and I think that's what makes you a little bit unusual. I'm curious, what do you think, or what do you see that most solos are doing wrong that want to scale, but it's preventing them from scaling up?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think, the marketing is very important. I tell all of my associates that, you should be doing at least one marketing thing a week, that you should be out there going to an event, going to lunches, do at least one thing a week. I do one thing a day at minimum, but I tell them do just one thing a week. It's going to pay off for you in the long run. So I think marketing is key. And I think that the finances are key. I think that it's important to have, a good bookkeeper on hand. It's important to look at, revenue, look at expenses, and kind of track those things and determine what works.
So, you've talked about marketing a lot, and the types of marketing tactics that you're using are not revolutionary. It's not, I think a lot of lawyers are looking for that sort of magic solution that's going to solve all their problems from a marketing perspective. What would you say that that's working for you? What kind of separates you from those other lawyers from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you're not allowed to use this word, obviously, but I think you need to be an expert in your field. You need to be very specific. You need to have a niche, and you need to be on the top of someone's mind when they think, oh, there's this issue. Oh, who I know knows about that. Boom, let me pick up the phone. Let me call that person. So because I have such a niche, I think that's made my practice successful. I see a lot of practitioners that are kind of general practice and will take any case that comes in. I think that sometimes can tarnish your brand.
What about for those lawyers that are niched and they're still kind of stuck? And I'm putting you on the spot, but what I'm seeing is that what separates you from other lawyers is just the sheer consistency of your marketing. It's nothing revolutionary, right? But you're spending, half of your time doing marketing. You said just before that you do an event every day, an event or a marketing activity every day. And I don't know that you could say a lot of lawyers do that. Would you say?
No, I don't think so. I think, I'm constantly brainstorming, like, who can I meet? Who can I network with? Who's a good potential referral source? Constantly brainstorming. I create lists of that stuff. I try to, I track who I meet. So it's kind of a big part of my practice.
So what do you think that is the one thing or a key person that you hired that really rapidly accelerated your firm's growth? Kind of looking back.
Yeah, I have, I guess, two partners now that pretty much manage my practice, or different subsets of my practice. I mean, just to go through my practice areas briefly, we do IRS collection work. So individuals or businesses that owe the IRS will negotiate arrangements for them. We do tax litigation, criminal tax. We do a lot with foreign bank accounts, and we do a lot of tax audits and appeals of those. I hired a few years ago partners that would manage certain subsets of my practice, which have allowed me to kind of step away from some of the day-to-day management of the cases, still involved in some of the higher level strategy issues, but step away from the day-to-day management and, focus on running the law firm and focus on marketing.
And so when you made those hires, did you see an acceleration in the growth of the practice?
Yeah, absolutely. It freed my time up. Also, a very significant part of my time is client intake and client development. Like the client intake, I speak with, I don't know how many, 15, 20, 25 prospective clients daily. Not all of them are, great clients and it doesn't always make sense financially for them to hire us. But even if that's the case, I'll always give them, 5 minutes on the phone and point them into the right direction and say, hey, this is what I would do if I was in your situation. So I look at that as kind of a marketing method as well. And, that pays off. You never know when they tell a friend or when they have a more serious issue down the road that they need to hire us for.
So is that how you're spending your day now? Doing your one or two marketing activities every day, and then basically operating in a sales and client development perspective. Enhancing the relationship between your firm and your clients. You're that liaison between the team and the clients.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I do primarily, and then I'm involved in some of the strategy and in there's certain cases and some of the larger cases I have to be involved with as well.
So, essentially what you're describing is that it's the same logic as hiring that first law clerk, right? I mean, you were getting tied up in managing this bigger entity and you needed to bring in, higher quality people. So go back a little bit though, when you first started hiring your first couple of people, was there anything that you did that you sort of said, that made a big difference for me? Like that I don't know whether it's the first hire or the second hire, or, usually there's something that like kind of clicks and things just get easier.
Yeah.
What might have been that moment for you?
Yeah, I think that once you start bringing in people that have a lot of experience and that you feel comfortable with, and 90% of the decisions can be made by them, and frankly, I have people that work with me that are smarter than I am, so that's a great thing. So that really frees up a lot of time. It really frees up a lot of energy.
Okay. For small firm lawyers who have ambitions to grow a substantial firm like yours, what's the one or two things that you recommend that they do now?
Yeah. So I think a lot of small firm lawyers want to hold on to doing everything. They want to do everything that's within their law firm, and they don't want to let go. I think in order to be successful, in order to grow, you really need to delegate. And so, I have the mentality, anything anyone else can do for you, have them do it. Just get it off your plate. I spend all day literally delegating all of my tasks. I have, assistants that respond to my emails for me, review my emails. I try to delegate and make and free up time wherever I can. I think delegation is certainly key to growth.
So if you're that solo, and you're in that spot where you're starting to feel the pressure and you need to sort of alleviate some of that, what do you think a good first hire is? Is it an assistant, a virtual assistant, a law clerk, an associate? I mean, I know it'd be different for different practices, but kind of looking back, what would you think that first hire is sort of the hardest one, right?
Yeah, it was the hardest one. I was very fortunate because I think I hired a second-year law student, and she was a CPA already. And I told her, look, I'm going to give you this opportunity. I think half of your job position is going to be administrative, but I can assure you that half of your job position is legal as well. And, she wasn't, some people are a little snooty and they don't, if they're in law school, they don't want to do anything administrative. Well, I always come from the mindset that you're better off starting from the bottom and learning how everything works and then working your way up that way. And that same person, she's still with me today as an attorney CPA here at the firm. So I was very lucky to have her be like in a hybrid role.
Very cool. A lot of lawyers struggle with delegation because of, we're in the perfection business, right? I mean, whether you're an accountant or a lawyer, it's the same, but you can't make mistakes. And I think that, lawyers get very hung up on that. What's your suggestion to lawyers about, you have to overcome that to be able to hire people? What's your suggestion for, delegating?
Yeah, I think you just need to hire people that you trust and people that will do a good job. I think that's important. If somebody's not living up to your expectations, I think you need to find somebody that will. I mean, there's a lot of very smart people out there, and finding somebody that you click with is vital. Great.
So Glenn, I think any lawyer around the country could potentially do business with you, but because of the nature of your practice, how do people find you, and what types of things do you help other lawyers with?
Yeah, and to back up, like we have offices in DC, Virginia, Maryland, and then Miami, Florida. I have a substantial practice in South Florida as well. But I do have clients abroad all over the world. I have clients that are all over the country. We practice primarily in, IRS controversy work. So yes, we do represent people all over.
Who are good cross referral sources for you in terms of attorneys, where they can send business to you and likewise you back to them?
Yeah, we do a lot of work with different business attorneys. We do a lot of work with bankruptcy lawyers. We do a lot of work with family lawyers. All different types. Tax is such a broad area. I think it comes into almost everyone's practice at some moment in time.
Okay, awesome. Well, I know that you can find Glenn at frosttaxlaw.com. Pretty easily reachable guy. So if you've got an interest in meeting Glenn, he's an avid networker. I'm sure he'd speak with you. And Glenn, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This has been great.
Thank you. Enjoy being here.